Every couple imagines their wedding planning journey to be this beautiful, exciting montage. You know, the one flipping through bridal magazines with a smile, tasting cake samples, twirling around in a venue that feels like it was built just for you. For me and my partner, that's exactly how it started. A whirlwind of joy, spreadsheets, and endless possibilities. But there's a character in our story that the montages never prepare you for, the well-meaning, iron-willed mother who sees your wedding not as your first day as a married couple, but as her last chance to throw the party she always wanted. My name is Lucas Ramirez. At the time all this kicked off, I was 29 years old and my partner was 30. We were paying for our own wedding, every single cent of it. That's an important detail. It wasn't a point of pride, really. It was a statement of fact. This was our event funded by our work to celebrate our union. We had a vision for it, something that felt like us. Modern, a little minimalist with personal touches that told our story. We wanted it to be a day of authentic joy, not stuffy tradition. And then there was my mom, Elena, my 54-year-old, endlessly energetic and incredibly opinionated mother. I love her, I really do. She's the kind of person who would move mountains for her family. The problem is she often decides where the mountains ought to be moved without consulting anyone else. She has a very specific idea of what nice is, what elegant is, what proper is. Her taste is traditional, very traditional. Think 90s ballroom wedding, but with a 21st century budget. And in her mind, our wedding was her magnum opus, the grand finale of her parenting career. The countdown began 180 days before the wedding, 6 months. It felt like a lifetime away, a vast expanse of time to get everything perfect. My partner and I sat down at our kitchen table, opened a fresh bottle of wine, and fired up the laptop. We were giddy with excitement. We found our venue, first a renovated warehouse space with exposed brick high ceilings and beautiful warm wooden floors. It was the perfect blank canvas. It was ours. We signed the contract and paid the deposit from our joint account. Step 1 complete. We felt unstoppable. That weekend, we went to my parents' house for Sunday dinner, buzzing with the news. When I told my mom we'd booked the venue, her face lit up. "Oh, that's wonderful, honey. Where is it?" "The Country Club. The Grand Hotel downtown." I saw the first flicker of a storm on the horizon. "It's actually a converted warehouse, Mom. It's really cool, lots of natural light, very industrial chic." The light in her eyes dimmed just a little. She forced a smile, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Oh, a warehouse. How unique." The word unique from my mother is not a compliment. It's a polite way of saying strange and probably a little tacky. She continued. "Well, that's fine. We can soften it up. Lots of drapery, big floral arrangements. We can make it look beautiful." Notice the word she used, we. Not you, but we. That was the moment the lines started to blur. In her mind, the planning committee was now officially a party of 3, and she was the chair. The initial discussions about decor started innocently enough. My partner had created a Pinterest board filled with pictures of simple greenery, long wooden tables, candles in minimalist holders, and warm Edison bulb string lights. The color palette was deep greens, charcoal gray, and hints of copper. It was moody romantic and very us. We invited my mom over for coffee to show her our ideas. We wanted her to feel included, to be a part of the process. That was our mistake. We mistook a desire for her inclusion as a request for her direction. She sat on our couch tablet in her hand, scrolling through our carefully curated vision board. She'd occasionally murmur, or "I see." After a few minutes of this, she set the tablet down, took a sip of her coffee, and gave us that look, the one that says, "Bless your hearts, you have no idea what you're doing." "This is a very rustic start," she began, choosing her words carefully. "But it's a wedding, not a camping trip. You need elegance. You need tradition. People expect a certain standard." Before we could even respond, she pulled out her phone. I started a little board of my own just to give you some ideas. Her board was the polar opposite of ours. It was a sea of white. White linens, white chair covers with giant satin bows, towering crystal vases, and roses. So many white roses. It was a visual representation of every wedding cliché we were trying to avoid. It wasn't a board of ideas. It was a blueprint. Her blueprint. See, she said her voice filled with genuine passion. Timeless. Classic. This is what people will remember. Your guests will walk in and they'll feel the importance of the day. My partner, who is far more diplomatic than I am, just smiled and said, "Those are really beautiful, Elena, but we're leaning towards something a bit more modern." My mom just waved her hand dismissively. Modern goes out of style, trust me. You'll look back at photos of exposed light bulbs, and you'll cringe. White is forever. And so began the Cold War of wedding planning. Every decision became a quiet battle of wills. We'd pick out an invitation suite with a clean sans serif font. The next day, I'd get a text from her with a link to one with elaborate, looping calligraphy, captioned, "So much more formal, don't you think?" We talked about having a gourmet taco truck for the main course. She nearly had a heart attack. "Lucas, this is a wedding, not a street fair. You need a seated dinner. Chicken or fish. It's what's done." Each comment, each suggestion was a little paper cut. They were constant and they were starting to add up. The underlying message was always the same: your taste is wrong, my taste is right. Your vision is a passing fad, my vision is timeless elegance. I tried to be patient. I tried to explain. "Mom, we appreciate your input, but this is our wedding. We want it to feel like us. We're not traditional people." Her response was always some variation of the same theme. But a wedding is about tradition. It's about family. It's about showing your guests a beautiful time. You have to think about what other people will think. That was her trump card, the ever-present amorphous judgment of the guests. Who were these guests? Our friends and family people who loved us and would be happy for us no matter what we served for dinner. But in my mother's world, they were a panel of silent judges holding up scorecards on everything from the thickness of the cardstock on the place cards to the fold of the napkins. The tension simmered for months. We won a few key battles, the venue was non-negotiable, and the taco truck was booked much to her chagrin. But with every victory we claimed, I could feel her digging in her heels on what she considered her domain, the decor. In her mind, our industrial venue wasn't a feature. It was a flaw she needed to fix. She was saving us from ourselves, one unsolicited suggestion at a time. What was supposed to be a happy time became clouded by strained phone calls and strategic planning sessions. My partner and I were a united front, but the constant need to defend our choices was exhausting. I was caught between the person I was building a future with and the person who gave me my past. The skirmishes over fonts and food were just a prelude. I could feel a larger storm brewing, and I knew it would be fought over the floral heart of the reception, the one area where she was determined to plant her flag covered in white roses. The storm I'd been predicting finally made landfall exactly 35 days before the wedding. It arrived as I expected in a flurry of white petals. My partner and I were at my mother's house for our weekly and increasingly tense planning check-in. These meetings had devolved from productive sessions into carefully choreographed performances where we would present a decision we'd already made and she would politely critique it into oblivion. We were sitting at her polished mahogany dining table, the one reserved for holidays and important guests. The air was thick with the scent of potpourri and unspoken disapproval. She slid a thick, glossy catalog across the table. It was from a florist whose name alone sounded expensive. "All right," she announced, her voice bright and businesslike, as if she were closing a major deal. "I've been doing some thinking. With everything else you two have on your plates, the taco truck logistics and whatever else, I've decided to take the floral arrangements off your hands completely. It'll be my gift to you." My partner and I exchanged a quick, guarded look. The phrase "my gift to you" was a red flag the size of a parade float. In my mother's vocabulary, a gift was rarely just a gift. It was a transaction. It was leverage. I opened the catalog. Page after page featured the exact same aesthetic she'd been pushing for months. Grand cascading arrangements of white roses, baby's breath, and eucalyptus. They were the kind of centerpieces you'd see at a royal wedding or a mob boss's funeral. They were enormous, ostentatious, and would look utterly ridiculous in our venue, which was a renovated warehouse with exposed brick and steel beams. "Mom, this is a lot," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. "We were thinking of something much simpler, smaller, more us." "Nonsense," she said, tapping a perfectly manicured finger on a picture of a floral arrangement that was taller than a fire hydrant. "Simplicity is for a backyard barbecue, Lucas. A wedding is a statement. It needs grandeur. It needs romance." She leaned forward, her eyes shining with a fervent, almost missionary zeal. "And nothing says romance like white roses." My partner, ever the diplomat, jumped in. "We were actually looking at some really interesting succulents, Elena. Maybe some air plants. Something that fits the industrial vibe of the space." My mother's smile didn't falter, but it tightened at the edges. It was a look I knew well. It was the look that said, "That's a cute little thought you just had now. Let's get back to reality." "Succulents," she repeated the word as if it were a foreign object in her mouth. "You mean cacti?" "For a wedding, Lucas honey, no. Just no. People will think you couldn't afford real flowers. It's tacky." The word hung in the air between us. Tacky. It was her ultimate insult, the final judgment on anything that deviated from her narrow definition of good taste. I felt a familiar heat rise in my chest. It's not about affording them, Mom. It's about what we like. We don't want giant balls of roses on every table. It's not our style. But it's classic style, she insisted, her voice rising slightly. It's the style that matters. Your wedding day isn't just about you two. It's a reflection on the entire family. It's about showing our guests, our friends, people I've known for 30 years, that we do things properly, that we have standards. There it was again. The invisible jury of the guests, the pressure of what her friends would think. This wasn't about celebrating our union. It was about staging a performance for her social circle. We weren't the happy couple. We were the lead actors in her production. She must have seen the frustration on my face because her strategy shifted. The iron fist slipped back into the velvet glove. She reached across the table and placed her hand on mine. Her skin was soft, her touch gentle, but it felt as heavy as a stone. "Look," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I know you're trying to be unique, I get it. But this is one of those times you just have to trust me. I know what I'm doing. I've already spoken to the florist, the one in the catalog. I got a preliminary quote." My blood ran cold. "You did what, Mom, we never agreed to this." "I was just getting information," she said defensively, "to help you out, and I've made a decision." She sat up straighter, her expression becoming resolute. "The flowers are my treat. I am paying for them. End of story. I will not have my only son's wedding reception look like a desert-themed science fair project." The offer landed on the table with a deafening thud. It wasn't an offer. It was an ultimatum. She wasn't asking for our permission. She was informing us of a decision she had already made. By offering to pay, she was attempting to buy the final say. She was stripping us of our right to choose, cloaking it in the guise of generosity. If we accepted the money, we accepted her vision. We forfeited our vote. My partner's hand found my knee under the table, a silent signal of support. I took a deep breath. This was it. This was the moment the Cold War turned hot. "No," I said. The word was quiet, but it felt like a cannon blast in the silent room. My mother blinked, genuinely shocked. "What did you say?" I said no. I repeated, my voice firmer this time. "Thank you for the offer, Mom. It's very generous, but we are not having those flowers at our wedding, and we will not be accepting your money for them." For a second, she looked completely lost. It was as if I'd spoken to her in a language she didn't understand. The concept of someone turning down her money, and by extension her control, was utterly alien to her. Then the shock hardened into anger. Her face flushed a deep red. "I am just trying to help you," she hissed, her voice low and sharp. "I am trying to prevent you from making a huge, embarrassing mistake. Do you have any idea how much work goes into this? I'm trying to take something off your plate to give you a beautiful, elegant wedding, and you're throwing it back in my face. You're not helping Mom," I said, my own voice rising to meet hers. You're taking over. You haven't listened to a single thing we've said. You don't care what we want. You only care about what you want and what you think your friends will think. This is our wedding. Ours, not yours. How dare you, she whispered, pulling her hand back as if my skin had burned her. After everything I've done for you. The emotional blackmail was the last straw. The years of little manipulations of her taste being presented as gospel of my own preferences, being dismissed as a phase, it all came rushing to the surface. My partner stood up. I think we should go, she said calmly, her hand on my shoulder. We're not going to solve this tonight. My mother didn't look at her. Her eyes were locked on me, blazing with a mixture of fury and wounded pride. Fine, she clipped. Go. Go plan your little cactus party. But don't come crying to me when you look at your wedding photos in 10 years and realize how cheap and trendy it all looks. Don't say I didn't warn you. The drive home was silent for the first 10 minutes. The argument replayed in my head a loop of anger and frustration. I felt guilty for hurting her, but I was also buzzing with a strange sense of liberation. A boundary had been crossed, and for the first time I had defended it with everything I had. Finally, my partner spoke, her voice soft. Are you okay? I let out a long, shaky breath. I don't know. I hate fighting with her, but I feel like if I had caved on this, I would have been caving on everything. It wasn't about the flowers anymore, was it? No, she said, reaching over to squeeze my hand. It was never about the flowers. We got back to our apartment and sat on the couch, the unspoken question hanging in the air. What now? We had won the battle, but the war felt far from over. My mother was not someone who accepted defeat gracefully. She was a master of the end run, the back channel maneuver. I could already picture her calling the florist herself, putting down a deposit in our names, and presenting it to us as a done deal, forcing us to either look ungrateful or accept. She would find a way to get her white roses onto those tables, even if she had to plant them herself. I looked at my partner. The stress of the last few months was visible in the tired lines around her eyes. This was supposed to be a joyful time for us, and instead, we were fighting a war of attrition over floral arrangements. I felt a surge of protective anger. Enough was enough. My mother wanted to make a statement with her flowers. She wanted to show everyone that we did things the right way, the traditional way, the Elena Ramirez way. And in that moment, a new idea began to form in my mind. It was petty. It was passive-aggressive. It was a little bit devious. And it was absolutely perfect. If she wanted a statement piece, we would give her one. We would find a centerpiece that was so untouchable, so unmovable, so undeniably ours, that she would have no choice but to accept it. We needed something that couldn't be fluffed, adjusted, or replaced at the last minute. We needed a floral arrangement that was quite literally impenetrable. I looked at my partner, a slow grin spreading across my face. You know, I said, I think you were onto something with that whole succulent idea. Her eyes lit up as she understood immediately where my mind was going. Oh no, she said, laughing. You don't mean... Oh, I do, I said. I mean, if we're going to have cacti at our wedding, let's not mess around. Let's get the cactusiest cacti we can find. The tension in the room broke. We both started laughing, a release of all the stress and frustration from the last few weeks. The plan was absurd, but it was also brilliant. It was our declaration of independence. My mother had drawn a line in the sand, and we were about to fill it with spikes. The next morning, exactly 30 days before the wedding, the laughter had faded, replaced by a quiet, determined focus. We were a team on a mission. I brewed a pot of coffee, we opened our laptops at the dining table, and began our search. The search term was simple, large, spiky cactus. I wasn't just looking for any succulent. I needed a statement. I needed something that radiated a very clear, very simple message: do not touch. I scrolled past charming little arrangements, past elegant sculptural cacti that looked more like art than plants. They were beautiful, but they were too approachable. My mother could still work with those. She could weave baby's breath around them or place them on lace doilies or do something to claim them as her own. No, I needed a fortress. And then I found it. The vendor was a specialty nursery called Desert Bloom Botanicals. The species was Cactus grusoni. The common name was the golden barrel cactus. They were perfect. They were almost perfect spheres, ranging in size and covered from top to bottom in a dense, intimidating lattice of bright yellow, needle-sharp spines. They didn't look like they wanted to be decorative. They looked like they wanted to be left alone. They were the introverts of the plant world, and I had never felt more seen. The website had a gallery showing them in event decor. They sat in simple modern pots, terracotta slate gray, matte black. They commanded the space they were in. They didn't need flowers or ribbons. They were complete on their own. They were beautiful, but in a severe, uncompromising way. They were everything my mother's white roses were not. My partner pointed at the screen. Those, she said, those are the ones. We measured the reception tables from the blueprints our venue had sent us and calculated we'd need 15 of them. Not too big, but substantial enough that you couldn't just casually push one aside to make more room for a wine glass. We selected 15 beautiful, perfectly round golden barrels, each in a simple slate gray pot. Then came the most critical part of the operation. On the checkout page, we entered the delivery address, not our apartment, but the wedding venue itself. We scheduled the delivery for the morning of the wedding with a note in bold letters, "For event staff only, Atienne Day of Coordinator." We paid for it right then and there, a non-refundable prepaid order using our joint credit card. The confirmation email arrived 29 days before the wedding. It felt like launching a satellite into orbit. It was out of our hands now on a trajectory that could not be altered. The chain of custody was sealed. The cacti would go from Desert Bloom Botanicals directly into the hands of the venue staff. My mother would be completely bypassed. She wouldn't even know they existed until it was far, far too late. For the next 4 weeks, I lived a strange double life. On the phone with my mother, I was vague and non-committal about the centerpieces. When she asked, I'd say things like, "Oh, we're handling it," or "It's a surprise." I could hear the suspicion in her voice, but she had no tangible information to act on. I think she assumed we'd caved and were just too embarrassed to admit it. I imagine she pictured me calling a florist in a panic, begging for a last-minute order of whatever traditional flowers they had left. The thought made me smile. She had no idea that our statement pieces were already paid for, patiently waiting in a nursery, biding their time. The morning of the wedding arrived. I was a bundle of nerves, but not for the usual reasons. Standing there in my suit, I wasn't worried about tripping over my vows or if the rings would fit. I was worried about the delivery truck from Desert Bloom Botanicals. My partner, looking absolutely radiant, grabbed my hands. "Stop checking your phone," she whispered with a laugh. "They'll be there. The plan is perfect." Just then, my phone buzzed. It was a text from our wedding coordinator. It read, "Morning. Just wanted to let you know the centerpieces have arrived. They're definitely here, and they are very pointy. Staff has been briefed. See you soon." I showed the text to my partner, and we both broke into wide, relieved grins. The cacti had landed. The ceremony was beautiful. We said our vows, we exchanged rings, we kissed, and we walked back down the aisle as a married couple, hand in hand, into a future that we were building together on our own terms. But the final test was yet to come. We made our grand entrance into the reception hall. The music was playing, our friends and family were cheering, and the room looked incredible. And there they were. On each of the 15 tables sitting squarely in the center was a golden barrel cactus. They were magnificent. Their yellow spines seemed to glow under the warm lights of the venue. They were stark modern and absolutely unequivocally untouchable. They were our silent, spiky guardians. I scanned the room for my mother. She was standing near the gift table talking to an aunt, and then she turned. Her eyes swept across the room, taking in the scene. I watched as her polite social smile froze on her face. Her eyes darted from one table to the next, and with each one, the realization dawned. Her expression went from confusion to disbelief to a cold, hard fury that she quickly tried to mask. She saw the cacti. She understood the logistics, the planning, the sheer audacity of it. She understood that she had been utterly and completely outmaneuvered. She looked across the room and her eyes met mine. I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. I just gave her a small, calm nod as if to say, "This is our day. These are our choices." For a moment I thought she might make a scene, but what could she do? She was a guest at an event that was already in progress. The venue wasn't her property. We had paid for it. The centerpieces weren't hers to change. They belonged to us. To walk over and try to remove one would be insane. It would be a public tantrum. And besides, how would she even pick one up? She held my gaze for another second, her jaw tight. Then she gave a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of her head and turned back to her conversation, her back now to the room. The battle was over. There was no confrontation, no yelling, no dramatic speech. There was only the quiet, spiky reality of 15 golden barrel cacti standing guard on their tables. Throughout the night, I watched people's reactions. Guests would sit down, look at the centerpiece, and a little smile or a look of surprise would cross their faces. I heard someone say, "Well, that's different." I saw a cousin lean in as if to inspect one, then quickly pull his hand back as he registered the lethality of the spines. People talked about them. People took pictures of them. But not a single person touched them. They didn't try to move them to the side. They didn't try to adjust them. They respected the boundary that the cacti so clearly established. Late in the evening, after the cake was cut and the dancing was winding down, my partner and I stood at the edge of the dance floor, just watching the last of our guests enjoy themselves. My gaze drifted over the tables. Every single one of the 15 cacti was in the exact same position it had been in at the start of the night. Pristine, undisturbed, untouched. My mother had wanted her flowers to be a statement about tradition and doing things the right way. In the end, our cacti made a much more powerful one. They were a declaration that our life together would be our own, built by us with our own choices, in our own style. It wasn't about being different for the sake of it. It was about being authentic. It was about protecting the very beginning of our partnership. The victory wasn't in the argument we'd had 35 days earlier. It was in this quiet moment watching the evidence of a boundary perfectly set and universally respected. My mother never mentioned the cacti again. Not that night, not ever. She didn't have to. We both knew what they meant. They were the first and most important foundation we laid for our marriage. A little bit prickly, maybe, but strong, self-sufficient, and entirely ours.